Tonight, the final moments in a cross-country manhunt. We now know how the two BC fugitives died, but some questions.
What led these two Canadian teenagers down such a dark path of destruction
May never be answered.
I hope that I have the opportunity to speak my truth.
Inside the SNC-Lavalin affair, what happened between Justin Trudeau and Jody Wilson-Raybould? A CBC News exclusive.
What it's like to be Canada's tennis champion.
Everything right now that's happening in my life is incredible. I still haven't touched my phone yet.
Good luck.
Trying.
And the story behind that moment. I sit down with Bianca Andreescu. This is The Next.
After all the drama and the fear, some clarity tonight about the bodies police found in the brush near Gillam, Manitoba. There is now no doubt they are the bodies of Cam McLeod and Briar Schmigelski, two fugitives who led police on a manhunt for weeks. But we also now know how they died. Tanya Fletcher takes us through the findings as well as the questions that still linger.
At least one answer today after the cross-country manhunt that spanned weeks and crossed provinces. We now know Briar Schmigelski and Cam McLeod died of apparent suicide by gunfire. What we don't know is when exactly. RCMP suggests they lived for days after they were last spotted alive on July 22nd near Split Lake, Manitoba, but that they were also dead for days before they were found August 7th. Medical experts say it can be tough to pinpoint specific dates.
The two bodies may have different states of preservation depending upon the microenvironment where they were. A body kept in very cool conditions can remain pretty well preserved for a long time. A body in very warm conditions, not so much.
RCMP also confirmed two firearms were found near the bodies. Forensic analysis will determine whether those are the same weapons connected to the killings of Lucas Fowler, China Dees, and Leonard Dick. Police are also still searching for a motive.
They can look at some of the evidence and come up with some very often scientifically based reasons for what happened. And again, since we don't have statements off the accused, that might be our best bet.
A behavioral analysis team will now investigate the circumstances surrounding the deaths of Schmigelski and McLeod. Investigators sifted through more than 1,000 tips over the course of the case. Even the military was brought in to help. So another question, why did such an extensive search turn up so little for so long?
This is a massive territory and very inhospitable territory, some of the most rugged terrain in the country. The police took all the available measures in terms of personnel, in terms of technology.
We reached out to the families of the suspects and the victims. None of them wanted to comment as they await the final update on the investigation, but RCMP say that could be a few weeks yet. Tanya Fletcher, CBC News, Vancouver.
Okay, and Adrian, we're still waiting on the official autopsy report for another high-profile death.
Well, that's right. So we knew, Andrew, that over the weekend, Jeffrey Epstein died in apparent suicide in his New York City jail cell. What we're hearing tonight are some unconfirmed reports that he hanged himself. So, but what everyone really wants to know is how he managed to kill himself when he was supposed to be under close watch. A mystery that has triggered widespread conspiracy theories. Today, as Paul Hunter reports, there's a promise to find some answers.
It has at once baffled and enraged countless in this country. In this New York jail, the suicide of Jeffrey Epstein. Said the U.S. Attorney General today, it's appalling.
We are now learning of serious irregularities at this facility that are deeply concerning and demand a thorough investigation.
Epstein, as most by now know, was an enormously wealthy money manager and convicted sex offender with a high-powered social circle, including, in years past, Donald Trump. As Epstein's life ended early Saturday, he stood accused of fresh sex crimes involving underage girls and faced potentially decades in prison. And so the big question, how on earth was the apparent suicide even possible in such a high-security place? Days after an earlier apparent suicide attempt, a fellow inmate removed from the cell. Somehow, Friday night, guards here failed to look in on him. Conspiracy theories abound. fueled in part by that social circle, friendly not just with Trump, these images are from '92, but also Bill Clinton and Prince Andrew. On Britain's front pages today, himself now accused of assault by one of the women also accusing Epstein, denied by Buckingham Palace. Meanwhile, Epstein's death brings renewed focus on this woman, his associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, accused recruiter of girls to be assaulted, whereabouts for the moment unknown. At the wedding of Bill Clinton's daughter, Chelsea, in 2010, that's her off to the side among the invited guests. As for what she did with Epstein,
and there are allegations that Miss Maxwell was an active participant in the sexual abuse.
Indeed, even though authorities note the criminal case against Epstein died with Epstein,
any co-conspirators should not rest easy. The victims deserve justice, and they will get it.
today in France, where Epstein owned this property, fresh calls to open an investigation there. Questions now worldwide mount. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
As you heard Paul say, Jeffrey Epstein was staggeringly wealthy. So what happens to his assets now? Court filings said Epstein was worth at least $500 million US, with more than $10 million in annual income. He also owns some incredible real estate, including a $77 million mansion in Manhattan's Upper East Side, a 27,000 square foot ranch house in New Mexico, a home in Palm Beach, just down the road from Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort, 2 private islands in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and that apartment in Paris's Tony 16th arrondissement. With no known will, no wife, no kids, his brother Mark could inherit it all. But today, Epstein's accusers called for a freeze of his assets ahead of civil suits against the estate. The feds could also seize his assets to provide restitution to his victims if they can prove all those assets are connected to criminal activity. Let's go to Hong Kong now, where it's already Tuesday. Now, some flights are resuming at the airport after protests crippled the international travel hub on Monday. Today, Canada is weighing in with a warning for China at a time when relations are at a low point. This as protests in Hong Kong only escalate. This gateway to Asia became a stage of chaos. The Hong Kong International Airport, one of the busiest in the world, brought to a standstill. Passengers greeted with a chorus of appeals from young Hong Kongers pleading for support.
Fight for freedom!
The goal, peaceful disruption. And there wasn't any violence here, but it was violence that sparked the airport occupation. This incident, in particular, over the week in the streets of the Chinese territory, has stunned Hong Kong. Demonstrators tear-gassed and hit with rubber bullets inside a subway station. Most outrageous for protesters was this image of a young female demonstrator shot in the eye.
Hong Kong has just seen its darkest weekend in its contemporary history.
Today, local journalists held up pictures of the injured, demanding answers from the city's police chiefs.
As long as there are violent protesters, if they are aiming to use deadly force against any other people, we will try our best to do investigation and have them apprehended.
Now, China is getting increasingly frustrated with the protests. They are now into their 10th week, and what began in response to a proposed law allowing extraditions to China has morphed into a wider pro-democracy movement. The protests have begun to show signs of terrorism, a Chinese government spokesman said, warning that violent anti-government demonstrations deserve severe punishment. So as China ratchets up its rhetoric, Canada is calling for calm.
We see the need for de-escalation of tensions. We certainly call on China to be very careful and very respectful in how it deals with people who have legitimate concerns in Hong Kong.
Trudeau's comments are unlikely to improve already poor relations between Ottawa and Beijing. But the government insists it is focused on protecting Canada's interests in Hong Kong, home to 300,000 Canadian citizens. A Global Affairs travel advisory for Hong Kong is still in effect, warning Canadians to exercise what it calls a high degree of caution due to disruptions to public transit and possible acts of violence.
We are just 10 weeks away from the federal election, and we now know which party leaders have been invited to the two major election debates and which one in particular has not. Now, on the invite list, the Bloc Québécois, Conservative, Green, Liberal, and NDP leaders. But Maxime Bernier, leader of the People's Party of Canada, not invited. That news was delivered by David Johnston, commissioner of the debate organizing group. That could still change. The party's relatively new, only formed last year after Bernier left the Conservatives. The first debate is set for October 7th. Chris Hall is our national affairs editor in Ottawa and, of course, host of The House on CBC Radio. So, Chris, essentially there was a list of criteria to get an invitation, and Bernier didn't meet enough of them.
That's right. He only meets one of the three criteria, and you need to meet two. And the reason primarily, Andrew, is that he leads a new party that's never elected an MP. But I think what got our attention in all of this is the criteria around which David Johnston really is excluding the PPC and Maxime Bernier. And that is that he doesn't believe, based on public opinion polling and seat projections, that the PPC has a legitimate chance of winning more than one seat. That said, it's a preliminary decision. He's given Maxime Bernier until August the 23rd to come up with 3 to 5 ridings to submit that he believes the party has a good chance of winning, and any other evidence by September the 9th that warrants including Maxime Bernier in this debate. So not a lot of time to meet those demands.
Yeah, but no surprise here, Maxime Bernier has already responded in sort to this. What did he have to say?
Yeah, he did respond by saying he was disappointed, obviously, in the decision and saying it doesn't take into account the political context or the fact that the PPC is a populist party. Here's part of what he said. The statement says, the PPC represents a unique perspective. It is the only party that offers distinct policy positions on several topics that are at the heart of political debates, including immigration, climate change, freedom of expression, corporate welfare, foreign aid, supply management, and many other topics. Whether they have a list to submit and what those ridings might be that they could win, I didn't get an answer. But of course, getting into the debates is really important for any leader, let alone one of a new party, to show what your positions are, to be able to allow voters to contrast and compare how you compare to the other leaders. So clearly the PPC will continue to make the case that it belongs, and its leader, Maxime Bernier, belongs in these debates.
Chris Hall in Ottawa, thanks so much.
Thanks, Andrew.
Now, as Justin Trudeau looks towards the campaign, it's hard to forget one issue from his first mandate that has perhaps done more damage than any other, talking about the SNC-Lavalin controversy. At the center of it was a justice minister who claimed she had been improperly pressured, and a prime minister's office saying that was simply not the case. Now, an upcoming book by CBC senior writer Aaron Wary describes a relationship between the two that maybe never really worked. Our Rosemary Barton has more on the new, behind-the-scenes details of a controversy that would shake the very foundation of the Liberal government.
I, Jody Wilson-Raybould, will be faithful and execute the powers as a Minister of Justice and the Attorney General of Canada.
It was Justin Trudeau who helped recruit Jody Wilson-Raybould back in 2015. But no matter what Trudeau did over this past spring, he could not find a way to keep her in the Liberal fold. And he seemed to understand the danger of that even before she was gone, telling Wary in January, I totally understand that when you have powerful, positive symbols, it's also possible to have that snap back on you when you make other decisions. Wary writes that it was actually Wilson-Raybould who first alerted the Prime Minister's office that a newspaper was about to publish a story about a deferred prosecution agreement and SNC-Lavalin.
The allegations in the Globe story this morning are false.
Trudeau's first response was to say there had been no undue pressure on the former Justice Minister.
Neither the current nor the previous Attorney General was ever directed by me or by anyone in my office.
But Trudeau then heard the minister was not pleased with his answer. And now, for the first time, we are learning how the next couple of dramatic days unfolded.
I have met with Minister Wilson-Raybould a couple of times already since arriving in BC. We spoke about our shared goals for our country and for this government.
On February 10th, Trudeau and Wilson-Raybould met privately at the Vancouver airport, where the minister told Trudeau she was worried about how he was being served by some of his advisors, and where, according to the book, she reveals for the first time she felt inappropriately pressured on the SNC file. Trudeau says this was his reaction. My first question was, why now? Why are you telling me this now and not months ago? He says she gave no ultimatums at that meeting, so the two met again the following morning, when Trudeau tried to reassure the minister that they could figure this out, where he again said Wilson-Raybould had the power to make her own decisions on the matter.
Her presence in cabinet should actually speak for itself.
Not long after that press conference, Wilson-Raybould asked for a third meeting, where she told Trudeau she was quitting. A surprised Trudeau said this at the time.
This resignation is not consistent with conversations I had with Jody a few weeks ago when I asked her to serve as Canada's Minister for Veterans Affairs.
Even when speaking with Wary for the book, Trudeau says he doesn't fully understand why she left. These are delicate conversations, and I don't want to mischaracterize them or speak for anyone else, but I continued to not entirely understand why. Wilson-Raybould would not speak about any of these conversations to Wary, citing cabinet confidentiality. But she did say this about the accounting of the meetings. You are receiving false, self-serving, one-sided and inaccurate accounts of relevant events. This is not fair.
Resigning was the right and necessary thing to do for the office and for the Prime Minister.
The resignation of Wilson-Raybould also led to the resignation of the Prime Minister's close friend and Principal Secretary Gerald Butts a week later. Wary reports Butts had tried to quit several times before, but Trudeau would not let him, saying, "I was very confident that he had not done anything wrong."
I hope that I have the opportunity to speak my truth.
But Trudeau just couldn't seem to give up on Wilson-Raybould either, making attempts to keep her in the Liberal caucus even during her stunning testimony at committee.
Asked the Prime Minister a direct question while looking him in the eye. I asked, quote, "Are you politically interfering with my role, my decision as the Attorney General?"
Even when it was revealed the former minister had secretly taped a phone call with the clerk of the Privy Council.
Hello, Michael, it's Jody.
Trudeau was still talking to his former Justice Minister about a path forward. Wary reports they even worked on a joint statement, but ultimately could not get past one issue. I can't apologize for something that I don't fundamentally think we did wrong, and that was really sort of the key of it. Without that admission, Wilson-Raybould would not agree to the statement. The talks collapsed, and just one day later, Wilson-Raybould and her colleague and supporter Jane Philpott were removed from caucus.
The trust that previously existed between these two individuals and our team has been broken.
Sorry, I don't have anything to say.
In the book, Wilson-Raybould describes her relationship with the Prime Minister as decent but challenging. But 3 weeks after pushing her out of caucus, Trudeau tells Wary his relationship with the former Justice Minister was never really what he imagined. A number of times over the first years of my government, I grumbled to myself that it was difficult for me to not have a Minister of Justice that I was super simpatico with. In fact, it was arguably the single event and relationship that caused Trudeau's government the most damage in public opinion polls, and it happened just 8 months before the election. Rosemary Barton, CBC News, Ottawa.
And some of the other stories we're following tonight on The National. Manitobans headed to the polls.
It's time for a new mandate to keep moving Manitoba forward.
The major parties have been in campaign mode for weeks after Brian Pallister announced in June the election would happen a year early. He says the move is in response to a changing province, but some analysts believe the shift is meant to capitalize on a Conservative lead in the polls. Manitobans vote September 10th. About 800 cows have been killed in a major fire at one of Manitoba's largest dairy farms. It started early this morning near Steinbach, just under an hour's drive from Winnipeg. There were about 1,000 animals inside at the time, fire crews managing to save about 200. No word yet on the cause. And a Quebec City man accused of setting his ex-partner on fire will remain in custody following a brief court appearance today. The victim is in critical condition with burns on 50% of her body. The attack happened Friday in front of the woman's 2 children and mother. And there's a second investigation underway, this one into the officers who escorted the man to jail. The incident was caught on camera. You can see one of the officers holding a fire extinguisher. The other appears to stifle a laugh. The union says the officers feared retaliation from the suspect's family, who weren't actually there, but the department is considering if this was a tasteless prank.
Across the country, people are talking about Bianca Andreescu, Canada's rising tennis star. Well, today, lucky me, I got to talk with her about yesterday's bittersweet victory over Serena Williams and the other tennis superstar who has become a big fan.
I mean, Billie Jean King is an icon, and I really would love to follow in her footsteps to just help with women's equality and just like yesterday's moment, women supporting other women.
In just a few minutes, we will bring you our full conversation. But first, to give you a sense of the impact she's already had, Greg Ross caught up with some younger players who now dare to dream about following in her footsteps.
They are the next generation of Canadian tennis hopefuls competing at the same club that Bianca Andreescu was once a member and the same tournament that she won as a 15-year-old back in 2015. And now 4 years later, she's winning the Rogers Cup. I mean, what goes through your mind when you think about it?
Well, it's really cool to see another Canadian having that success, and now we get to train at the same place she trained at with the same coaches, and it's inspiring to see her doing so well.
15-year-old Mia Kupras and 14-year-old Marina Stakuzic have both been invited to the National Training Center in Montreal starting in September, the same place Andreescu trains now.
If we're like kind of on the same path as her, maybe it could happen. Hopefully.
They say they're not only inspired by her success on the court, but also the way she handles herself off of it, something we saw a glimpse of in Sunday's final. Wow. A candid moment caught on camera. The veteran Williams wiping away tears after being forced to withdraw while being consoled by the 19-year-old Andreescu. Many of these young players were watching.
I thought it was like very professional for her to come in and support her.
But it's nothing new to Assad Juno, who's been coaching Andreescu for the last 2 years. Were you surprised to see Bianca do that?
No, really. She's got that care for people. That's one thing that impressed me the most when I started working with her. She makes you feel like you're part of the team right away. And that's something that I think we connect really well.
And it's one of the big reasons she's a hit with many of these younger players. Many have had their own experiences with her.
I hit with her once and she was just having a regular conversation, I guess. I could say that I hit with a Rogers Cup champion, Indian Wells champion. It's cool.
If only these young players could have the same meteoric rise that Andreescu has had. Just to put it into perspective, going into last summer, she was 182nd in the world rankings. When the latest rankings came out today, she had moved up to 14th. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
So stay with us. Right after the break, a sit down with Bianca Andreescu. We talk equality in sports, her favorite part of the tournament, and of course, that moment with Serena Williams.
Yeah, sounds pretty great. And later in our moment, you're invited to Dildo, Newfoundland. You'll hear the small town's message for one late night host and his reply.
I would tell Jimmy to come to Dildo because there's great people here. It's a beautiful community. There's so much to see and do, and I'm sure he would love it here.
Canada's Bianca Andreescu, just 19, flashing the prize that confirms she's a champion on the rise.
This has been a dream come true. This week has not been easy.
Not easy at all. Andreescu came to the Rogers Cup fresh from a shoulder injury that kept her idle for weeks.
Andreescu has done it.
When a groin pull slowed her down last Friday.
Andreescu getting some medical attention.
She summoned the iron will that seems to set her apart.
When I step out on the court, I'm fearless. I show no mercy, no matter who I play.
For the top prize, she faced longtime hero Serena Williams, and Williams' own injury led to this extraordinary moment.
Yo, I watched your whole career. You're a beast.
Andreescu comforted her opponent just before being declared the victor.
This is just the beginning.
Today, I sat down once again with Bianca Andreescu. So, congratulations. You are the winner, and I'm wondering what winning this actually feels like.
It's really hard to describe a feeling like this. I mean, playing in front of my home crowd and just being able to win at home. I've dedicated so much hard work and sweat on that center court, so being able to actually take the title this week is truly incredible. It's a blessing, really.
And I know that people say, well, you know, it was 19 minutes in the final, but you actually played more tennis this week than anybody else, any of the other women on that court.
Yeah, this week has not been easy. I've been playing 3 sets basically every match. I've been on court for 2.5 hours, 3 hours every day, no days off. It wasn't like Indian Wells, but I'm just really proud with how my body held up.
Even though, as you said, this isn't the way you wanted to win this.
No, definitely not. Seeing Serena go down like that wasn't easy to see. I was pretty confused as to what happened at first.
Well, what did happen? Like, what was the moment when it first occurred to you that something wasn't quite right with Serena?
I didn't think anything was wrong with her. She was missing a bit more than usual, but I didn't feel like she was in pain or anything like that. But I knew something was wrong when she sat down in between games, and then like 2 seconds later the physio came out, and then the chair umpire told me that she's no longer able to play. And at that moment I felt, it's hard to find a word to describe it. I'll just say weird, because at that moment I did realize that I just won the Rogers Cup, but it's not the way I've expected it to be like. And I don't know, my instinct just wanted me to go give her the biggest hug possible, because I felt for her so much.
You looked a little tentative approaching her, you know, like as you went over there immediately, but when you got there was like this, what do I do?
Actually, no, I knew what to say.
Wow. The match is over.
Yo, I'm watching your whole career. You're a beast with injuries. I've been through so many already, and I mean, you know how they are. This sucks. On your back, right? I know everything about you.
I know she knows how to manage these things. She's been through a lot as well, and sadly yesterday she just couldn't continue, and that's one of the toughest decisions an athlete can make. So I have a lot of respect for what she did.
When you took her hand, I'm not sure I've ever seen anybody hold Serena Williams' hand. I mean, there's such a bubble around her, but it was such a classy, instinctive thing to do. She seemed to recognize that.
Yeah, I don't know, something just came upon me and just wanted to give her the biggest hug possible.
Had you ever actually met her and had a real conversation with her before that moment?
Nope.
Are you serious?
That was our first encounter ever. And she said some nice things, especially after I gave my speech. She said, "You are very mature. I don't think I could have given that speech at that age." And then she said some really nice things in her press conference, which will really stick with me.
Well, she was asked, you know, what is your moment of the tournament? And she said it was a moment with you.
My best moment is definitely today out there with Bianca. I'm officially a fan. I mean, I was before, like I said, but I just think I was really sad. And she made me feel a lot better, so that was really nice.
I'm wondering what means more to you, winning this or winning the admiration of Serena Williams?
It's crazy to actually hear those words come out of her mouth about me. I admire her a lot, and just being able to have that moment with her and what she said about me will truly stick with me forever, I'm sure.
If someone were to ask you that, was it necessarily this moment, or was there another moment during that tournament that you're going to take away? Maybe something we didn't see on TV.
Being able to celebrate with my parents afterwards. They're not able to travel with me to every tournament, and they didn't travel with me to Indian Wells, so being able to actually share this moment with them at home in my backyard was, I mean, after every match, not necessarily yesterday, but just having that moment with them means a lot to me.
Last time we talked about icons, and I said if you could ask Billie Jean King something, and we weren't really sure what you'd ask her, but she has been writing about you. And 3 hours ago, she wrote this. At just 19 years old, Bianca shows a level of maturity well beyond her years. This is how women should treat each other. Her empathy and support for Serena were admirable, competitors and women supporting women. What do you make of that from this legend?
What can I say about that? I mean, everything right now that's happening in my life is incredible. I still haven't touched my phone yet.
Good luck.
I'm just trying. I'm just trying to live in the present moment right now and just try to savor it as much as possible. I mean, Billie Jean King is an icon, and I really would love to follow in her footsteps to just help with women's equality and just like yesterday's moment, women supporting other women. I think it's an incredible thing.
I also spoke with another woman today. I spoke with Faye Urban this morning.
Wow.
Who won in 1969.
Yes.
And right now with Faye Urban serving, she trails.
She really wants to meet you. She says you would have won anyway. She got, in 1969, $150 for her troubles in winning. And you know, you had a very healthy paycheck yesterday, but it was half of what Rafa Nadal got. What do you make of that?
That's just how it is at the moment. Billie Jean King has done so much already, and it's starting to improve more and more. I mean, at the Grand Slams now, it's more equal than it's ever has been. But yeah, it should always be about equality. I mean, men and women should definitely look at each other in the same way. We're all human at the end of the day, so why shouldn't us women get the same equalities as men?
One question I asked you last time is, what are your goals? Because I presume they had to change after Indian Wells, and I'm going to guess they're going to have to change again now. You said at the time.
Yes, I actually didn't get a chance to sit down with my coach to talk about that yet, but in my eyes, I would like to maybe crack the top 15.
So now it's 14. You've done that. So what's next?
What's next? Well, I'm definitely not satisfied. I have very big dreams, and I don't settle for anything less than what I want. And so I really hope that I can crack the top 10 now.
Okay.
And play in the WTA Tour Finals by the end of the year.
U.S. Open?
Oh yes, and U.S. Open, of course. Now with this win, especially after coming back from being 2 months off, I think it's really given me confidence to do really well in the U.S. Open. I really believe that I can do big things there.
Well, you've got a whole country that had several heart attacks in the last week watching you and
That's
then
what
cheering
makes the sport
and
so
crying.
crazy.
No, it's
so
amazing.
enjoyable to watch.
And that moment with Serena, I have to say, Canadians really felt a kinship with you in that moment. And I think that, you know, you didn't just earn the admiration of Serena, you earned a lot of respect from people.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Good luck. Would you like this?
Oh my
Billie
gosh,
Jean King
yes.
tweet?
I haven't seen that yet, but I'm definitely going to post that on my wall.
Oh, you should. You should.
Thank you so much.
Can I shake your hand?
Give me a hug.
Oh, okay.
I'm a hugger.
Oh, you're a hugger? All right.
It was so nice seeing you again.
It was really
that was
nice seeing
awesome.
you. So her match against Serena Williams drew the biggest Canadian TV audience ever for the Rogers Cup Women's Final. At any given moment, more than 590,000 people were watching the women. That is nearly double yesterday's audience for the men. Andreescu's next chance to shine, that is the U.S. Open. It starts 2 weeks from today.
Getting butterflies just thinking about it. Okay, still ahead on the National, preventing medical errors. The steps hospitals are taking to fix the problem and keep patients safe.
Other industries that are high risk, like aviation, would never allow the number of people to die as a result of their services. When my mom was in hospital, there were a number of adverse events, preventable adverse events that occurred in her care that ultimately led up to her death.
Drug mix-ups, botched surgeries, even accidental falls. Medical errors can have a devastating impact, setting back a patient's recovery, prolonging a hospital stay, even ending a life. And a new study finds there are significant financial costs as well. So as Christine Birak shows us, tackling those mistakes could be invaluable.
They are rare, but we know mistakes happen in hospitals. Few are this dramatic. Most involve incorrect drugs and doses. Using more than 600,000 Ontario hospital admission records over a year, researchers found nearly 6% of patients experienced harm during their hospital stay. Most of the mistakes were medication errors, followed by infections acquired in hospital, procedural errors, and patient accidents. Those harms led to over 400,000 added days in hospital, costing the province an estimated $1 billion in 1 year.
Any intervention that costs less than $1.1 billion to reduce adverse events would be worth it.
When they went and grabbed a box, grabbed right instead of left and got the potassium chloride instead of the sodium chloride.
The bottles looked similar. A simple substitution error 15 years ago cost Deborah Preuss's mother her life.
Other industries that are high risk, like aviation, would never allow people to die as a result of their services. We need to not tolerate the current level of adverse events.
It's not about the number of errors, it's about how we study them, how we analyze them, and how we learn from them.
Enter Black Box, a monitoring system pioneered here at St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto, is now being used around the world. As in airplanes, it records conversations, along with surgeries, operating room traffic, and hundreds of other data points. It's found simple distractions can result in serious errors.
People coming in the room just to ask how was your weekend and did you watch the hockey game last night? And irrelevant conversation due to critical steps of the procedure.
As a result, the hospital is instituting new operating room procedures. While no one expects medical errors to reach zero, everyone agrees the goal is to keep hospital patients as safe as possible. Christine Birak, CBC News, Toronto.
Still ahead on the National, from a lottery win to a big headache, why one Nova Scotia family's dream home is catching their neighbors' attention.
They're putting a lot of money in to come up here and relax and have a great time, and then be kind of shunned and treated like they're not wanted.
Welcome back. A friend of the Dayton, Ohio shooter is now facing federal firearms charges. The Department of Justice says Ethan Cawley bought the body armor and 100-round drum magazine that was used by Connor Betts, but they say there's no evidence he knew Betts was planning a mass shooting. So the charges, not to do with the shooting itself, but actually for lying on a form to purchase the firearm, saying he didn't use drugs. Connor Betts was shot and killed by police just over a week ago after he opened fire in Dayton's entertainment district, killing 9 people, including his own sister. The Trump administration has announced major changes to the Endangered Species Act, sparking outcry from environmental groups saying the move will speed up the extinction of many species. The new rules, which go into effect in 30 days, allow the government to consider the economic cost of protecting a species. 10 state attorneys general say they plan to sue over the new regulation. And Typhoon Lakima continues to carve a destructive path through China's east coast. At least 44 people dead, more than a dozen missing. Since making landfall early Saturday morning, the deadly storm has tracked northward past Shanghai, forcing the evacuation of more than 1 million people and racking up an estimated $2.7 billion in damage.
It is a dream home, completely turnkey, overlooking the ocean, but the family who won it in a fundraising lottery last year insists they may be forced to sell. They can't afford the upkeep without renting it out on Airbnb. But as Jack Julian explains, the neighbors are having none of it.
They call it a dream cottage for a reason. You couldn't ask for a sweeter view. And Troy Fahey still seems a little overawed, remembering when his fiance's ticket hit big.
The two of us were like that high off the ground the whole drive up. It was so crazy, right?
They call it a cottage, but it's really a luxury seaside home with a view of Chester Basin, south of Halifax. It came fully furnished and ready to go.
Basically, they took every idea that we ever thought of, ever dreamt, and they put it in this place.
But Fahey and his family aren't ready to move in quite yet. He works as an industrial cleaner in Halifax. His fiancée is a roofer, and the kids are still in school. He wants to move here in 5 or 6 years' time.
We came up with the idea, put it on Airbnb. The money from that will help pay the taxes and, if there's any upkeep or anything like that, plus the other bills that come in with it, your power and whatnot.
Fahey says his guests love the place, but they don't feel all that welcome in the neighborhood.
The old stink eye, like they'll wave to certain neighbors and they'll just put their nose up in the air and walk away.
At $400 per night, it's not the vibe he was hoping for.
And I feel really bad because they're coming from all over the world. I mean, we got them from Texas, from Scotland. We just had some guests leave from the Middle East. So they're putting a lot of money in to come up here and relax and have a great time, and then be kind of shunned and treated like they're not wanted.
He says some residents have even complained to his guests directly.
Somebody showed up here and told them they had to be in bed by 11 o'clock, and none of the neighbors wanted to be here, or want an Airbnb here.
Fahey's problems have moved beyond angry neighbors. In 2 weeks, the Neighborhood Association will hold a vote on banning short-term rentals. Fahey says that could spell the end of his dreams of a seaside retirement.
We would have to penny pinch it. We wouldn't have much of a life, right? It's just every ounce of money that we'd have to put it off to the side so that we can keep this place.
Fahey's neighbors wouldn't talk to CBC about their Airbnb concerns. The developer also declined to comment. Jack Julian, CBC News, Chester Basin.
Okay, up next on The National. The small Canadian town attracting a whole lot of attention.
It's been absolutely phenomenal. I've seen more people in this community the past 2 or 3 days than I ever had in my life.
Just call it the Jimmy Kimmel effect. We go to Dildo, Newfoundland in our moment. That's next. Long giggled about here in Canada, the tiny community of Dildo, Newfoundland is now in the international spotlight. It's being wooed by an unlikely suitor, an American late-night TV host looking to add to his resume. Now, maybe Dildodians are used to getting attention, but Jimmy Kimmel just recently discovered them, and now, having never been there, he's launched a campaign to become its mayor. He featured the community on his show last week, and since then, tourists have been flocking to it. So, Dildo's moment in the limelight is our moment tonight.
4D stands for our dignity, our name will never change.
Everything is booming like around Dildo.
We're fiercely proud of our name. We're fiercely proud of our heritage.
Dildo is special because it's a beautiful town, beautiful people.
There's so much to see and do, and I'm sure he would love it here.
It's very exciting to see all the tourists around get more and more every day, and they walk into the coffee shop and everybody enjoyed to be a part of Jimmy Kimmel campaign.
We don't have a proper town council and we're not a municipality, so we're not able to officially elect the mayor, but in the fun of things and the good sports we are, if his platform is good, you never know, we might make him mayor of some sort.
And hell we fought for liberty and the for days of old. The animals lives out the loving word that we all call Dildo.
Okay, so thank you, Jimmy Kimmel, for adding to the economy of Dildo, Newfoundland.
Exactly.
But we were just saying that this is not news. I mean, I don't know if somebody gave him an atlas or a present.
Yeah, there are a lot of funny named Canadian cities, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
This one has been around for a long time, but we're researchers here at the National.
Yeah, and so apparently maybe there's a serious side to Dildo as well, because, and we don't know the exact origin of the name and how it came to be, but it's worth knowing that there is a Dildo Island, the name of which goes back to, I think, 1711.
Right.
A dildo is also referring to pins that act as pivots for oars in a rowboat.
And I think we're out of time.
There's also a dildo. What? Dildo cactus is another thing as well. But yes, let's just leave it there. That's probably the safest, most prudent thing to do. That's the National for this August 12th. Good night.
Good night.